Hey folks, well, it's been long enough. I think we need to make a video about my stereo system setup because it has changed quite a bit. I've been meaning to do this for a while, and I'm in the mood. There's some exciting stuff to talk about here. So, the setup is, it's changed a lot, but I'd say some of the bare bones stuff's the same. I still have the same Bozak speakers from the 70s. They were low-end speakers for the time, but low-end doesn't necessarily mean they sound bad. It's from your typical era where speakers looked kind of ugly on the inside, but sounded great. Three-way speakers, you get your big woofer here, corrugated paper surround, you get a mid-range here and a tweeter here. And it's all just, you know, plain old drivers. There's no silk dome tweeter, there's nothing fancy here, which is why it's a low end. But honestly, even despite that, they sound great. Low end didn't necessarily mean bad back in those days. And of course it's ported on the bottom, which is nice. Gives you some good bass response out of these speakers. They're a little boomy sitting on the floor with this carpet here. And honestly, in the position they're in, between this couch and all the rest of the stuff, they really aren't in the best position for sound. But in this apartment that I'm in, I really don't have much of a choice. This layout is what worked the best to fit all my stuff in here, so this is just what I live with. The other set of speakers I have are on top of my hutch here, and those are some Sony bookshelf speakers, and those are those B speakers there. And they sound great as well, so I switch between them depending on what kind of sound I want and where I'm sitting. If I want some sound all throughout the room, that's when I use the Bozaks, and if I just want some sound while at my desk, that's when I just use these Sonys. So, it's a pretty versatile setup. The cabling I'm using for those speakers is nothing fancy. The Sonys are using lamp cord, and the Bozaks are using some Radio Shack speaker wire that I had lying around from years ago when they were still open. So, I'm sure you guys want to know what the components are. Those have changed a lot. So, let's get started, shall we? Of course, the core of this system is the receiver. It is an NAD 7240 PE power envelope receiver. It's from 1988, and these things are a hidden gem. They sound really, really good. Like right up there with some of the Stereo Wars Pioneer stuff. Funny story how I got a hold of a lot of this NAD equipment. Just kind of walked in the door of the record shop that I work at sometimes, and I bought it off the boss man for some money. Not a huge amount of money. We're talking like around $150 to $200 for some of this stuff. And you know, it just doesn't go for a lot because it's not Pioneer, it's not Marantz, it's not Sansui. You know, it's just, it doesn't have that recognition that a lot of these other hi-fi brands do. So NAD stuff goes for a little bit less. So that's lucky in my case because it really sounds just as good as all that stuff does. Although some of these are known for problems. These have the soft clipping circuit in them, which makes clipping sound less bad. But the problem with the soft clipping circuit in a lot of these NAD receivers is that that circuit tends to get hot and it'll overheat eventually. So I would recommend turning the soft clipping feature off. On the back of this there's a switch that lets you do that. So if you get a hold of an NAD receiver, especially a power envelope one that has the soft clipping feature, turn that feature off to save your receiver. But anyway, this is from the late 80s. It has a nice green power button, 1/4-inch headphone jack. You get two sets of speakers. You can run them separately or at the same time or just shut them off. As you can see, I usually put them on A. A is the Bozaks, B is the Sonys. This receiver sounds so good that I am able to leave the bass and the treble completely in the middle, which is fantastic. It has a bass EQ button, which messes with the bass a little bit. That actually does make the bass sound a little better, in my opinion. Infra off, I forget what that does. Like, I honestly forget what that even does. It has a mono switch, which is great for a lot of things. Like, say you're not getting very good FM reception on the display up here, or on the receiver end of this thing. You can hit mono. If you have if you have a record that was recorded in mono, it's better to hit the mono button, I think, to make it sound a little better. You can turn the FM noise reduction off if you want to, in case the station, you want some more high end out of the station. Has a tape monitor, of course, single tape monitor, which I've actually had to hook up some switch boxes to, since there's only one on this receiver. I was used to having two on the Technics I was using previously to this. The radio has 5 presets for each band, so AM and FM. I only ever use FM on here. There's a low level button, so let's say you get a phone call or something and you need to just make this thing quieter. There you go. It's just basically a dB reducing feature. Now, in addition to the bass EQ, there's a loudness curve on here too. So if you're listening on really small speakers like the Sonys, for example, at a low volume level, you can turn loudness on and that will improve a lot of the fidelity. You can turn FM search on and off, which is nice. So it's a pretty full-featured receiver. And the display is a nice red color, which I'm a big fan of. That's their signal strength meter down there with the triangle and the square. This is the Breeze. That's the station that it's on right now. You get, I forgot to mention, you get 4 functions on this. This is really telling of the era of this receiver. You get CD, CD for a line level input, phono for a moving magnet cartridge, turntable input, you get the radio tuner, and you get video. Video is what I use for like the multi-purpose line level input. But you can see that you could put this under like a TV or something to get better sound out of it, and they thought of that. So you could have one entertainment center back in the 80s for that stuff. So, very good receiver. The cassette deck came as a part of the package deal when I bought this stuff. It's an NAD 6340. NAD used to rebadge a lot of cassette decks, but this one I think is their own design. At least I'm pretty sure it is. It did require some repair. This one needed a new belt, which was a big pain in the ass to get installed. I had to remove the mechanism and move a bunch of linkages around and crap to get to it. It was a bit of a nightmare, actually, to change the belt in this thing. But once we did, Bossman and I helped do that together, or did that together. The quality is very good. It sounds just as good as the Nakamichi DR8 that I have. So I'm impressed with this thing. It sounds great. So NAD's cassette decks are pretty good. You don't see them very often. They also had turntables and some CD players as well. I have the CD player as a part of this package deal, but it is a big, bulky magazine type CD player, so I don't have it in this rack because it's literally too big. I chose a different CD player that you'll see instead. But anyway, that's the NAD stuff that's in this setup, or NAD I should say, because NAD just sounds rude. So this is an interesting cassette deck in that the features it has are kind of unique to most that I see. It has a car button, which supposedly makes your cassette sound better in a car if you record with it. I haven't really experimented with that because I don't have a cassette deck in my car. So it's kind of a neat feature though. Has nice feeling buttons. They're a little bit mushy, but a little bit clicky once you get to the inside. It has Dolby B and C noise reduction, which are both very good implementations. The B is not too muffled and C works well. There's a play trim adjustment here, which is very interesting. You can turn this up and down and it basically varies the treble. So let's say you have a very worn out tape that just has no high end. If you turn this all the way up, it brings the high end back from a worn out tape, which is very nice, especially if you're just going to listen to that tape. There's an MPX filter for recording from the radio, and there's a fine bias adjustment. And it supports normal chrome and metal tapes. It does not support ferrochrome. It is much too new for that. But you can record ferrochrome using the normal position without any trouble. Has a manual record level, which is separated left and right. The inner one is left and the outer one is right. And it's a very good sounding cassette deck. There's the counter belt you can see in there. It's just a very well put together, nice sounding cassette deck. We'll demonstrate that later. Above that, I have a DBX box here, which I also got from record shop I work at sometimes. It is a DBX model 222. noise reduction system. I didn't really get this for cassettes. I got this more for the DBX disc decoder. What this does is it'll decode DBX records and DBX tapes, which were a very interesting noise reduction system. Techmoan did a video about that if you really want an in-depth analysis of it. It's a pretty good system. It's very impressive. I have a few records with it, and they basically sound like CDs with this noise reduction system in place. It's truly amazing. So I have that in here just as a decoding box because it's very nice to have for those particular records and tapes. Above that, I have probably the most expensive part of this setup, ironically enough, is another cassette deck, the Teac W1200. This is a cassette deck they started selling in either 2017 or 2018. It's part of a range that they have. The Westlife has a video on the Tascam version of this cassette deck. I forget exactly the model number of that, but I'll put a link in the description to that video if you want to check it out. This is the consumer version of that, and the only difference between the two is a switch, I think right around here, that lets you turn on a feature that lets you cue another cassette through the headphone jack while listening to another one out of the outputs in the back. So that's nice for DJing or partying or running your own radio station or what have you. But this is just the consumer version. It's that cassette deck without that switch on it, pretty much. So it's the same exact thing. It uses Tannition mechanisms on both sides, which are not that well regarded in the audio community, but honestly on this deck I'm pretty impressed. Everyone gave me the impression that it would sound like a crappy boombox, but no, it actually doesn't. It sounds very good. I'm very impressed by it. And having a cassette deck that has DNR noise reduction built in. That's what the noise reduction system they use on this is. It's DNR. It's not their own proprietary one. It's DNR, dynamic noise reduction, which you don't apply to a tape when you record it. It's only for playback. I wanted a cassette deck that had that built in because I wasn't too happy with the implementation in some of the Archer boxes that I have. I wanted a cassette deck with a pitch control, and I wanted a dual-well cassette deck that wasn't 20 years old, that worked perfectly out of the box and sounded good. And this seems to be one of those. It's a very high-quality dual-well cassette deck. I could have gotten an older Tascam, but this just... the DNR is not in those. It's in this one. So I decided to get this particular deck, and I've been very happy with it. I've copied a few tapes on it. I've listened to tapes on it. It's been a pretty solid performer. Teac pulled no punches on these. They did the best with what they could get a hold of, and they really did it well. And one of my favorite features of this deck is parallel record. So let's say you want to record a radio show or something for you and a friend. Put two tapes on each side, wait for your radio show to start, then hit parallel record, and record it onto both tapes at the same time. Hand off a tape to your friend, keep the one for yourself, so you can get stuff done very quickly. I really like that. The features of this deck are fantastic. It's obviously not an audiophile quality deck, but the feature set's really nice. I already have a Nakamichi deck and this NAD down here, so I'm not sacrificing anything by using one of these decks here. I really like this deck. People will bash on the mechanisms, but the features of this deck are second to none. Fantastic. Teac, you did a good job. This is the Sony CD player that I'm using. This was a Goodwill find, believe it or not. It's just your standard early 90s CD player. And, you know, nothing too special, but it sounds very good. So that's what I use to play my CDs. And above that, if I can get up, I have an 8-track player in there. It's a little realistic 8-track player. It's the same one that the Westlife made a video of, which I'll also put a link for in the description. It's not a high-end one by any means. It's just a Radio Shack brand one from the 80s. This particular one's from 1983. These aren't like super high-end or anything, but they sound pretty good and they're reliable compared to other decks that I've had. I had an older realistic one with a record button on it, which I wish I could find again. Those are really nice. But this one has been a lot more reliable than that one has. So this is just to have a way to play 8 tracks. I'm not a huge 8-track aficionado. I get in the mood to play with them, and then I get out of it. So it's nice to just have a simple one here. I'd ideally like one with a record button so I could record my own, which I might get to someday. You never know. The record shop holds many surprises. But this one's been very good, actually. Been very happy with this one. And behind that, there's some switch boxes, which you can barely see. But I use those to control the sources in. I use those to control the sources to tape monitor and tape monitor in and out. So I can choose which deck I want to record and playback on. Do recording and playback on, I should say. And it's a bit of an intricate, annoying system, but it's the best I got. And above that, I usually put what I'm currently playing with on top of the rack itself. Currently, I'm playing with a Technics SL-D2 turntable, which I put my own cartridge on. And this table's been fun to play around with. Very much enjoyed it. But my main turntable, of course, is the Fluance RT83. Most people online seem to have the RT85, because that's the flagship model, but I got the RT83 because I prefer a metal platter. I know some people don't like those because they ring, but I don't know. It's just nicer to me to use something that's metal instead of plastic. Just makes me happier. This has been a very good table since I've owned it. I know a lot of people seem to watch the video of the RT83 when I first got it. It's been a solid performer. Very, very nice tone arm. The Ortofon 2M Red's also been a solid performer. Whenever this stylus gives up, I'm probably going to replace it with a Dakagoka. At least I think that's how you pronounce that. MP110, more than likely, because that is less expensive and better sounding than the Ortofon 2M Blue. So that's likely what will replace that once this cartridge and stylus are done. But honestly, I don't think that's going to happen for like half a decade, because I really like the sound of this Ortofon 2M Red a lot. It's miles above the Audio-Technica stuff I'm used to. So I've been very happy with it. It's a very good table. So that's what I've been using as my main table. I'm very sad I got a scratch on the front in the finish there. So it's definitely my table now. So let's give a demonstration then of all this stuff. Obviously I have a computer plugged in up here too. This is something I should mention actually. I've looked at Wi-Fi streaming boxes for this particular setup, and you see things mentioned like the Chromecast audio, and that's a good option because it has a good DAC in it and it even has optical out. But the problem with those is that they're discontinued products, so who knows how long those are going to be supported and work since they're an IoT device. They also tend to have trouble with Spotify, from what I've read online, which is a bit of a problem for me because that's what I use as my streaming service. It integrates well with all the stuff I use, so that's why I ended up using it. I'd like to get Tidal at some point too, because that's lossless. But Spotify is really good, so that's what I've been using for most of my streaming needs, as far as music is concerned. There are other streaming boxes I've looked into. The Bose SoundTouch adapters are very good. My parents have one of those, but they don't support that many services. They work with Spotify Connect, which is nice, but other than that, they don't support a whole ton of services compared to something like an Amazon Echo input. That one is the most versatile I've seen so far. The Echo ecosystem is very good for streaming music, but it's not really that hi-fi. Unfortunately, the DACs in those are not as good as something like the Bose or the Chromecast audio. So the Echo stuff, well, I don't know. The Echo input supposedly has a kind of a crappy DAC in it, but the Echo Dot, which is slightly above that, has a much better DAC in it that's more equivalent to something like your basic CD player. So, I don't know. I'd have to get my hands on that stuff to try it, but I don't want to put a wiretap in my house either. I'm not a huge fan of those voice assistant products. So, I figured the best solution that will last the longest and cost me the least amount of money with the least amount of planned obsolescence is just a plain old computer. This Compaq CQ61 has been acting as sort of my streaming box. I use it for listening to things like music on Spotify, maybe some music off of YouTube, and even better, internet radio. I use a program on Linux called G Radio for internet radio, and it has Groove Salad built in, and a bunch of other stations. And I tend to just leave those playing in the background while getting some work done or something. And this Compaq has a surprisingly good DAC out of its headphone jack. So this has cost me the least. This computer was free when I got it. So, you know, you can't beat that, can you? Linux on a laptop has been my best way of experiencing streaming and a bunch of other stuff. It's just the most versatile way to do it that won't see, you know, device sunsetting anytime soon. Because if this laptop gets too old, I can just take the drive out and put it in another one, and there you go. The streaming is back up. So there you have it. That is an overview of my stereo system. Now, normally a turntable like this probably wouldn't be up here, but I just happened to be testing it and playing with it at the moment. So that's what's up here. We'll test it and demonstrate it anyway, just because it's there. But let's actually demonstrate the stereo now. So you turn it on. The display up here with the radio, the tuner runs all the time, but you just change your input based on what you're listening to.
Sesame Street neighborhood and new live show. Plus meet our new neighbor, Snoopy. Join the
It's a very sensitive tuner, actually. I've been very impressed with it. The only thing I wish that it had more of was presets. This station I'm listening to now, The Breeze, does not have a preset, unfortunately.
access fees and restrictions apply. Available online only.
You've got all kinds of hustle, like get the job done hustle, and get the kids out the door hustle. If you've got hustle, we've got your back.
It sounds pretty good. I mean, if you turn FM noise reduction off, you'll hear the difference.
And specializations, and more than 70 years experience serving working.
Or maybe you won't, actually.
That includes rolling admissions to help you get started, and you could get credit for your career experience. Affordable courses, and no-cost digital course materials for most programs.
So that's the radio. It's very sensitive. It sounds very good. There's no muffled high end like I've heard on some other tuners. It's just a typical tuner from the 80s. It sounds great. No qualms about that whatsoever. You just need a good antenna, as you do for most of these, especially where I live. I live in a bit of a valley, so the radio reception's not that great anyway, but it tends to pick it up pretty well.
For you, visit UNUC.
Mono gets rid of a lot of the hash, too.
Radio, certified to operate in Virginia by Chev.
We are considered one of the safest and best children's hospitals in the country. We have some of the best doctors in America and a pediatric level 1 trauma center. We have world-class pediatric orthopedic care.
Yeah, that mono gets rid of a lot of the stereo hash, which is really nice to have built into the receiver itself. It kind of serves multiple functions, too. Not only does it make the audio mono, but it shuts off the stereo portion of the radio, which is smart. I like that. So, what's next? The cassette deck. Okay. Turn on tape monitor. Cassette deck just uses a simple array of LEDs. And it's mostly gear driven, but there's also, like, I think the rewind and fast forward is gear driven, but the main flywheel is belt driven. It's been a while since I've been inside there to check it out. Okay, so let's give it a try. I have a very, like, bootleggy copy of Luxury Elite and St. Pepsi's Late Night Delight tape, so let's use that as a demonstration. It's a nice gold cassette, how about that? Makes it look fancy. Nice quiet mechanism. So let's get to a song that I'll play for you. Sounds very good. I'll try and demonstrate the play trim feature for you. probably not the best tape to demonstrate that with, but it essentially is a treble control, which brings the life out of really worn out tapes, and that's really nice to have. Excellent sounding cassette deck. Very, very impressed with it. As you can hear, it does a very good job. It's nice and steady. The ability to adjust this, I think, is my favorite feature, just because you can bring life out of old tapes and make them listenable again and enjoyable again. Here's what the DBX thing looks like when it's turned on. It's just a bunch of LEDs, basically. DBX disc. Yeah, I don't know why that's playing the radio. That's been interesting. I think whatever the source is on here goes right through it because it's connected to the tape out, I think. So, yeah. That's the DBX box. DBX really has been covered very well by Techmon already, so I won't go into that. He has a very similar DBX box to this, actually, so I would check out his video on that particular endeavor. Now, let's check out the Teac. It's going to be a very similar type of demonstration. I'll play both sides of the deck so you can hear it and everything, so we'll be able to check it out. And I'll play it using the DNR noise reduction with that turned on. If I could speak today, that'd be great. I will play this with the main feature that I like on this thing, the DNR noise reduction turned on, so you can maybe get an idea of what it sounds like. I don't know, probably not through a camera microphone, but I'm going to play it that way anyway, just for the heck of it. So let me get all the switches up there changed to where they need to be, and we'll give it a demonstration. This is with the noise reduction on. Hear how clean that is? Now I'm going to shut it off. That's without noise reduction. Here's with it on again. So as you can hear, that noise reduction is very good. It's very effective, and it sort of auto-senses, unlike the Archer boxes that I have, so it just sounds better. It sounds a lot less like a low-pass filter and more like an actual noise reduction technology, which is really nice. And as you can hear, it sounds steady. The pitch is right. It's a very good cassette deck. I'm a big fan of this Teac. Of course, we can mess with the pitch control to make this even more vaporwave. Vaporwaveception, man. Pitch control is very good. Let me rewind that back a little bit, actually. And you can see the tape counter there. wonder if that pitch change will actually make content ID show up. I would laugh if that happened. Anyway, you can only change the pitch on this first deck here. You can't on the other one. So this is basically your recording deck, and this is your playback deck. So let's do the playback deck real quick. Yeah, I'm very, very impressed with this Teac deck. You know, people really poo-poo it, but as you can hear, it sounds great. It's not it doesn't seem to be like an audiophile deck, but it's good enough that it doesn't have to be. You know what I mean? If you're going to get a new cassette deck, this or the Tascam version are probably the best you're going to get at this point. So that's the main reason I picked it up. It was one of the best new cassette decks I could get a hold of, and very pleased with it. That way I can play my vaporwave tapes and be very happy with it. Now, next is the CD player. So let's take a look at that. Okay, so we have our CD player here, and to demonstrate this, I have something pretty cool. This is a jazz album put out by a buddy of mine from high school. He made his way to New York, into the New York jazz scene, and he got a band together and put out what I think is a very good album. This is a throwback to, like, I'd say 60s jazz. It's very, very good. The vocals from Veronica Swift on this are fantastic. If you're a jazz fan, if you like classic jazz sound, this is definitely an album to pick up. 2018 is when this was released. Very, very good album. It's on Spotify if you want to listen to it right away. But you can also buy this. You can also buy it on Amazon. So, yeah, shout out to Claffy for putting together a really, really good album. You did a bang up job, man. I'm very, very impressed with it. If you could press this on records, that would be awesome. I would so buy one, dude. Anyhow, that's the music we're going to use to demonstrate the CD player here. So let me get the disc out here. There's a picture of him looking happy with his bass. Yeah, it's a very well put together CD package here. An actual, honest to God, pressed CD. Okay, and then we switch this to CD. So we can listen to Claffy do his jazz thing. One thing you gotta remember is to take tape monitor off before you play the CD. Has a fade feature, which is really cool. You can fade it back in, fade it out. You can obviously do all your programming, your shuffling, all that stuff. You can even edit the fade time and all that stuff. So you can use this to make some pretty nice sounding mixtapes with all those fading features, which I think is really cool. It's a very excellent CD player. It has very rich sound, as you could probably hear from that first track. Alex's bass just screams out of those speakers, man. It was just loud. And that's not, I think that's more so my system than the recording. But it just comes right out, comes right to life. Very cool album. Very good CD player. Very pleased with it. I was using a Technics CD player before, which was also very good. But this one has more features and has less trouble with burned CDs than the Technics did. So this one I like more. So that's the CD player. There's not much to say about that other than it plays a good CD, man. It plays a good CD. And it has a very good laser mechanism in it, which is the reason I use it. Now, I don't know how I'm going to demonstrate an 8-track player to you without getting copyright problems. I don't have any self-made ones or anything like that. But rest assured, it does work. And as you can see, I have no shortage of tapes to fix and listen to and all that stuff. Some classics, some 80s stuff, even some Aussie stuff. So I got plenty of tapes to fix up and make work and all that stuff. So no shortage of stuff to listen to, but all of it's copyrighted, so I'm not going to demonstrate it. But it sounds consistent, it sounds good, it sounds rich, so it's a good little 8-track player. Like I said, if you really want a more in-depth video of that, check out the one on V Westlife's channel. So, with embarrassing 60s and 70s formats out of the way, let's go to a much older format, records. Now, of course, I would have the Fluance hooked up to the phono section of this particular receiver, and that's what we'll demonstrate with. There's a brand new album out by a fellow YouTuber named Pad Chennington. He put together a future funk album, and I think it's great. So we're going to use that to demonstrate this thing. You've already seen this thing in action. I forget if I was using this NAD stereo by that point or not, but I'll just demonstrate it working anyway. Nice little LED there, so let me go get the record. This is Pad Chennington's new album, the pressed disc. Has a pretty cool obi strip on it and everything. It's pretty cool. You did an awesome job, Pad. Right on, man. Not only that, but the music is excellent, if you like future funk. So, let's put some on, shall we? And why not demonstrate your record player with some colored vinyl? It's a nice, like, marbly type thing, which is pretty cool. So, let me turn the volume up enough for us to hear it, and we'll start the record. Now, one thing I have noticed since I got this turntable, it has some quirks. When you first pick the arm up, I'll do it the way you're supposed to do it and use the cueing lever. When you move it over, it doesn't spin at the right speed right away. It speeds up a little bit, then it slows down to the right speed because the auto-sensing speed control on this thing has to sort of figure itself out first. So you're better off using the cueing lever on these newer Fluance turntables with that particular feature in them. So let's give a demonstration of this record player. As you can see, this combination of stuff just sounds incredible. It even sounds great with older records too, which is mostly what I listen to, but I listen to a lot of records too, so that's the sound I hear most of the time is stuff out of this turntable or even the Technics turntable. We can demonstrate the Technics turntable too. That actually might not be a bad idea. Since it happens to be up here, we might as well try it through the system because I have a unique way of hooking this thing up that you might think is a little janky and funny. Here's the Technics I've been playing with just to show it. The SL-D2 It is not a quartz lock turntable. It is not an fully automatic turntable. It is a auto return turntable, but it is direct drive. It has a pitch adjustment. It has a strobe. It has a very good tone arm on it, as you can see. Very nice classic Technics tone arm. Has your adjustable anti-skate, your adjustable weight. Doesn't have a height adjust like some of the nicer Technics tables do. But I'd say the arm on that is pretty on par with the arm on this. Has basically all the same features, except that the anti-skating spring is has a little bit more adjustability on the Fluance's tone arm. And they actually have a spot for the 45 adapter. Oh my goodness. So many turntables don't, it's annoying. I'm using an Audio-Technica head shell, ironically enough, with an Ortofon Omega cartridge on it, which is one of their cheaper cartridges, but it sounds really good. Been very impressed by that. So if you need a good cheap cartridge, definitely this is a good one. Audio-Technica and Ortofon both make good cheaper cartridges. So I recommend this Omega just because I've been listening to it lately and I've been pretty impressed with it. Has your classic Technics mat on it. I had to clean this thing a bunch. The one flaw this turntable has is that the speeds between 33 and 45, when you adjust 33 right, 45 moves too fast. So then when you adjust 45 to be the right speed, 33 is the wrong speed. So I think this thing still needs some work, probably some fine-tuning adjustments there, but definitely more than good enough to give a demonstration. So let me stick Pad's record back on here. The dust cover is a little scratched up and nasty, but I got the dust cover off of eBay. So you kind of have to expect that. I should probably take some Novus products to this to make it look a little better. Maybe even Brasso would make it look better, but I'm just going to leave it alone for now. Now, how I have this other turntable hooked up is a bit interesting. There's only one phono input of my receiver, right? So I have it hooked in through the video input, which is where I have another switch box down here hooked up, which has about 4 inputs on it. So what I ended up doing was getting this cheap Pile PP444 mini phono preamp, and I'm just using that to amplify that turntable up to line level. It was the cheapest one I could get a hold of, and it actually sounds better than the old PP999 that I've been using. So it's a Pile product, it's cheap, but it works well for its intended purpose, so that's what I'm using. And that preamp combined with this cartridge actually sounds a lot better than you think it would. So let's give a demonstration of that. Yeah, even it lifts up pretty well still. I don't know if you can see this on camera, but it's the one on the bottom. The bottom one's pretty steady. I had to adjust the speed thing I had to fiddle with this speed adjustment quite a bit to get it that good. So I wish this thing was quartz, but it's not. You have to really screw with it to make it the way you want. But let's demonstrate it. Move it up a little bit. That auto stop feature is really nice. But as you can see, It sounds fantastic. I'd say that this turntable sounds a lot richer, but I would say that this turntable sounds a lot richer, mostly due to the cartridge that's on it, that Ortofon 2M Red, and because of the phono section in the NAD receiver itself. This is an inexpensive cartridge going through a pile preamp, so it's probably not going to sound as rich, but for what that is, that actually still sounds very good. If you listen to some older music, like some stuff from the 80s that's really dynamic, it sounds really, really good on this. But something like this turntable with that cartridge really brings out some of the sound in some of these newer records. So, there you have it. That's a demonstration of the record players. Now I'll show you what my streaming setup is like, because I think you'll find that interesting as well. So this cable here is yet another input on that switch box that I had the turntable plugged into, as you can hear by the buzzing. So let me turn this thing on here. It's a little difficult to get this stiff hinge open with one hand, but as you can see, it's a pretty lame consumer grade laptop. It's got some old AMD stuff in it. It's Windows 7, all that stuff. So what I did is I stuck Linux on this thing, because you don't really need a whole lot to play music. You just need something that runs the computer at all and runs the audio output to make that work. You could do this with almost any computer and you'd be set. Although some computers will have a better DAC than others. So what I did is I just set up Debian Linux with XFCE as a desktop, so I could have this dock up top. And what I ended up doing, go away. And what I ended up doing was just having my favorite things up here. I have Spotify, Rhythm Box for playing music, and G Radio, which is what I use for internet radio stations. And I found this background online. I think it looks pretty cool, so it kind of fits the whole aesthetic along with some of the art that I have. So, you know. But yeah, I'll demonstrate the streaming setup as well. Let me open up Spotify here. And it's just opens straight up, and you can play all your music. I looked up Alexander Claffey, that buddy of mine from high school again. Looks like he has a new album out, so that's pretty cool. The new album is called Teac. I'm not going to play that on this. I'm going to play the same stuff that we were listening to before. Looks like it's just a new single. Cool. No, it's not a new album. It's a new single. But let's play one of those songs I was listening to before. Let's play the first song again to see how loud the bass is coming off of the computer as opposed to the CD player. Yeah, the CD player clearly has a richer sound, but I think some of that's just the way Spotify does things more than it is anything else. The CD sounds better than Spotify does, but Spotify is really good good for this purpose if you just want to listen to some music and you're not interested in listening to your equipment. So that's Spotify doing its thing. There's also Rhythm Box, which you could use for internet radio or local music that's just on the computer itself, or maybe even stuff over the network. I could use it for podcasts too. But that's the music player of choice on this machine, I would say, at the moment. Then there's G Radio, which I use for internet radio. And these are the stations that I have queued up in here. Groove Salad is the one I listen to the most. That station has been around for years, probably since like the 90s, early 2000s or something. It's pretty old. Beals Radio is pretty cool. Deep House Lounge I really like as well. Jazz. Yeah, there's some pretty cool stations that are just suggested to you. So most of the time I leave it on Groove Salad or something, but that's just a really simple way that I've made here just to pick some music and have it play for stuff that's very, very digital as opposed to just CD digital. This, I think, is a good option. A good laptop with a good DAC on the output. It's very, very, very nice. And I think this is a better solution than a streaming box that uses Wi-Fi or one of those Bluetooth adapters, especially the Bluetooth adapters, man. On home hi-fi, that's just not that great because Bluetooth compresses the audio a little bit. That's better for something like your car or a dedicated Bluetooth speaker, I would say. But on home hi-fi, I would go for a Wi-Fi streaming box or a computer all the way. And I've chosen the computer route just because it's free. And it sounds probably just as good as a Wi-Fi streaming box would. So, that is my audio setup. It's a little bit intricate and complicated, but it does what I need, and I'm pretty happy with it. I wish the NAD receiver had more inputs, but unfortunately, yeah, it's a pretty simple receiver for the time. The newer ones that you can buy today, I think, have more inputs. NAD is still around today and still makes excellent equipment from what I hear. It's very understated and functional, and that's why I really like that brand of stuff. But yeah, that is the audio setup. Like I said, this turntable wouldn't normally be here. It'd just be the laptop, more than likely. But I happen to be playing with it, so it was part of the demonstration. Anyhow, I hope you enjoyed taking a look at my audio setup and listening to some esoteric music. I like to do that in videos, promote stuff that's a little bit out of the way that most people probably wouldn't listen to, just to give it some exposure. So there you have it. That is the stereo setup. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I definitely enjoyed making it. I had to just get into that mood to really do this, and today was one of those days, man. I even still have the remote and batteries and stuff for the Teac Cassette Deck down there, I just noticed. But anyway, that is the setup. I've been very happy with it. I haven't changed it in months now. It's just stayed this way, and I've used it as is without really changing anything other than what's on top there. So been very happy with it, very content with it. I don't think I'm going to change it for a long time. One thing I know is overdue is the speakers probably need a recap, but you know, they don't sound bad enough that I think it warrants it yet. I'll get around to that eventually, and we'll make a video of that, because that's something that a lot of people in hi-fi are going to have to do someday with old speakers, is recap the crossovers. So we'll make that its own video eventually, but for now, that's a video of the stereo setup. If you want to make your own, I suggest buying it in pieces like I did. Don't get everything at once, because it'll just eat your wallet immediately, unless you have the disposable income to do so. But I put this stereo setup is basically a decade of screwing around with equipment, trying to find what I like, and this is the best I have found so far. The best setup I've found. The only thing that I think could really improve is probably the 8-track player. That could be a much higher end unit that records and things like that, but this has been years and years and years in the making of playing with audio equipment and having just sheer dumb luck of getting stuff too. Remember that. Some of this is thrift store finds, some of this is just equipment that happened to walk in the door one day, and some of the other stuff is just, you know, curiosity too. You know, this hobby is very fun. If you let the snobbery go and the audio foolery crowd not tell you everything that you need, because, you know, that's just what the groupthink tank says, you can really have a lot of fun with this stuff. You know, high end, low end, whatever it is, you can find a setup that makes your ears very happy. And this one makes my ears very happy. The placement, I think, is the biggest thing I would change, but I would have to get a different apartment altogether to do that, so, you know, there is that. So, that has been this setup. If you'd like to find me in social media, you can look down below for my Twitter and Reddit and our Discord community as well. And I hope you enjoyed this video. Have a good one, everybody. Ciao.